introduction. Just for the record, I was not full professor in Würzburg. I don't want to, get credit for something.
Okay.
I was associate. But anyways, thanks for organizing this. Really, it has been a great pleasure. Yeah, I know it's, even if it's virtual, it's still a lot of work. So, and also thanks to the previous speaker, Michael Cook, for introducing so many things that I would have had to introduce otherwise. So I can probably get in time. Okay, so I want to speak today about thermogeling hydrogels, and we heard about this, but more for 3D printing and also a little bit for drug depots. So, but before I start, I want to also just make a little bit of advertisement for this special call for papers in PLOS ONE that I am guest editor together with Vivek Gupta. If you have interesting papers in terms of drug delivery, we have extended the deadline because of Corona until February 21. So feel free to submit to this virtual special edition. Okay, so, and also because sometimes I run out of time and I forget, I want to start to thank my students who really contributed most to what I will be talking about. Thomas Larson defended his thesis in 2019. He really started everything with hydrogels. Before, I never worked with hydrogels and I thought I will never will. Then Lukas Hahn joined our group afterwards, and he's continuing this journey. And also Jen, I will be talking about her work a little bit on the Leponite reinforcement of hydrogels. And we have a lot of collaborators for SUNS, small angular neutron scattering, for DLS in Mainz, and also with Vladimir Aseyev already in Helsinki. So thanks a lot. And I would like to mention that this project was also in the course, in the framework of the Center of Excellence in Germany, the Transregio Sonderforschungsbereich in German, 225, where we develop new methods for biofabrication. Okay, so it's about hydrogels for tissue engineering and the so-called biofabrication. And here we have to distinguish nomenclature-wise a little bit, one, the bio-inks, and one, on the other hand, biomaterial inks. Bio-inks actually contain cells. So we have living cells, and then we mix them typically with a hydrogel, and we then process it with the additive manufacturing technology. A biomaterial ink, in this definition, is a material that you can additive manufacture, but you only after manufacturing, you seed it with cells. So during the manufacturing, there are no cells. So bio-inks contain the cells during manufacturing, so it's a little bit more challenging because during manufacturing, you have to keep them alive. Okay. And this is just a definition from this paper, so basically just what I said right now. Now, why is it a bit difficult to keep cells alive in 3D bioprinting? Bio-ink development is certainly right now a really, really hot topic. Many things coming out, so it's a really difficult thing to know every paper at this moment. But what is the difficulty is basically if you want to print, you typically create shear stress in order to push the liquid or the hydrogel through the nozzle. And cells like a little bit of shear stress, but if there's too much shear stress, they really not like it. It depends a lot on which cells we're talking about. Some cells are quite tolerant, some cells are really not tolerant at all. So what you need to have is typically you want to have some kind of non-Newtonian fluids that have some kind of shear thinning. So just keep that in mind. And then other than that, of course, you need to be very cytocompatible. So the cells should not die, of course. You have to be able to have a consistent quality and sufficient quantity. Remember, if you print, you easily need several milliliters, maybe hundreds of milliliters if you run a bigger study. And as Sergey pointed out yesterday, often synthetic polymer chemists, we do a few hundred milligrams and then you don't really print a lot. You want to have after printing, so after you push it out of the nozzle, you want to have very rapid recovery of extrusion after extrusion, so you actually have shape fidelity. And you want to be somehow able to tune the physical and biological properties. Now, just to keep in mind, if you want to print, your inks cannot be chemically cross-linked because, well, it's just not compatible, the two. So you can have physical crosslinks, entanglement, but chemical crosslinks are really not an option before or while printing. After printing, it's a different story. in biofabrication, there is this thing called the biofabrication window, where we basically have on the one axis, we have, you know, the printability and shape fidelity. So actually what our G code, our code in the printing says, does it really look like this afterwards? On the other hand, we have very important, the cell viability, if the cells like it. And typically it's very easy to achieve one of the two. But it's not, or both very poorly, but it's very hard to get here where you have very good shape fidelity and cell viability. So there's a really big effort worldwide to push this traditional biofabrication window to the next level, where we really can then, you know, do things that we can't do right now. There are a lot of different ways how to print. It's just inkjet-based printing, extrusion-based printing, laser-based printing, and I don't have time to go into the detail. And there is a lot of work going on right now to actually assess printability. But what means printability is actually quite heterogeneously defined, generally speaking. But very recently, a nice review by Jos Malda's group came out here, Chemical Reviews, where they tried to look into this. And I think it's a very, if you start to get interested in bioinks, have a look there. So, generally speaking, bioinks, what are the options? Typically, one way to categorize is if you have a biological bioink or you have a synthetic bioink. The biologics are much more common for many people. So these are, for instance, alginates, collagen, silk, gelatin, hyaluronic acid, or many other things. These typically have a very good cytocompatibility, but they also typically have a poor rheological properties. They're not really 3D printable in most cases. And as many biological polymers, it's really, really difficult to get a good batch-to-batch reproducibility. Some of these things can be addressed by modification, chemical modification, but some of these also, there are some limitations there. If we go in synthetic bioinks, many of them are PEG-based, which is, well, that's just a neutral thing, let's say, for now. But for synthetic polymers, we need typically very high concentrations, which cells don't necessarily want. And also at very high concentration, it can be really a challenge to get the cytocompatibility right. But on the other hand, rheological properties are very nicely tunable with synthetic materials, and 3D printability can be very excellent because of this. Also, as a synthetic polymer chemist, I probably have to argue that upscaling can be, challenged, but it's typically probably easier than with some other materials from biological sources. Okay, so today I want to talk about novel thermogelling polymers, how to improve the printing, and also introduce a new class of inverse thermogelling polymers. So this can be done really quickly. We heard already the nice talk by Michael about thermogelling polymers, so I will skip this basically over this. There are many different things out there. As you saw before, some of them can be quite turbid, some can be optically clear, which is for some applications preferable. We already heard that before, Pluronic F127, which is the same as Poloxamer F400, Poloxamer 407. So this is basically the same that Michael talked about. And he also said that this gelates by basically forming a cubic lattice of spherical polymer micelles. Now, we are working with polyoxazolines, and yesterday and today you heard about, yesterday you heard about polyoxazolines already from Richard, and Richard also is co-author on this paper. And polyoxazolines have a rich, history of temperature responsive materials, but there were until very recently no thermogelling polymers based only on POX, polyoxazolines. So a few years ago, we thought we can make tri-block copolymers that look very much similar to Pluronic. So let's do that, and let's see if we can actually create thermogelling polymers. And this was done by, and if you look at basically at this ratio here, so we go from very hydrophilic methyloxazoline and ethyloxazoline, we increase the hydrophobicity by increasing the side chain length. And just around here, propyloxazoline has a similar LCST or cloud point temperature as polypropylene glycol, which is a hydrophobic block in Pluronics. So we thought, okay, let's make dry block copolymers with this. And that was actually work by Anna Sahoranova, who visited us from Slovakia back then. She's now in Vienna in Austria. So she synthesized a whole bunch of different tri-block copolymers, ABA type and BAB type, but very unfortunately, there was no gelation she saw up to 38%. We didn't go to higher concentration, but there's just never really gelation. We did see, however, these are clearly thermoresponsive materials. As you can see here, I will skip the details, but we only have a thermo thickening, so they get a bit more viscous in some narrow temperature window. Some of them don't respond in that respect, but none of them formed a gel. So, and I was kind of disappointed, but we could still get this published quite nicely, I think. But yes, no thermogel. And then I think last year it was that Richard and Bryn Monnery actually published this paper where they reported for the first time that a purely polyoxazoline-based block copolymer did form a hydrogel, but one limitation, if I may say so, was that you really needed very high degrees of polymerization. Still, they do form these flower-like micelles, and there's also they form hydrogels. But what we found actually for a few years before, that if we change the structure just a tiny bit in terms of that we introduce an additional methylene group in the backbone, we go to 2-propyl-2-oxazine instead of propyl-oxazoline, and we actually do a diblock copolymer, then all of a sudden we form a very nice hydrogel. And I will tell the story a little bit of this, and this is basically the PhD thesis of Thomas. So when we take these polymers at a concentration below 10 weight percent, block copolymers in aqueous solution, we actually see a cloud point. They become turbid. If we are in between 100 grams per liter and 200 grams per liter, 10 weight percent and 20 weight percent, the solution doesn't change when we heat it up. And when we go to 20 weight percent, we actually see gelation. And you can see here the picture, it's nice and liquid, quite low viscosity actually. And then you have this huge increase over 5 orders of magnitude in the storage modulus in a very narrow temperature window. And it becomes a nice gel that is completely optically transparent. We then looked also at lower concentrations, and we saw that at 5 weight percent, not really much happens. But then when we go to 10 weight percent and above, you see this increase in viscosity, but then only if you go to 20 weight percent, you actually see gelation. Note here is pluronic 10 weight percent, where it does not form a gel yet, but it's very viscous. So this is one of the, what I think, one of the limitations of pluronic, that it's very viscous. So it's hard to really pipette, even at 10 weight percent, but it doesn't form a gel yet. Now, this is just how it looks. You can see at 5 degrees, both 5 and 20 weight percent are clear solutions. It's a bit yellow from the synthesis, but it's nothing major. And if you go to room temperature, you have this turbid solution at 5 weight percent, and you have a nice clear gel at 20 weight percent. Then this was a block copolymer with both blocks have a degree of polymerization 50. Then Thomas increased the block length to 60, 85, and 100. We synthesized multiple batches of these polymers, and you can see how the gel temperature actually asymptotically basically approaches 13 degrees, which actually this 13 degrees here is the LCST temperature of this N-propyl-oxazine if we just look at it as a homopolymer. And we did try to come up with a nice phase diagram. We did small angle neutron scattering. We did light scattering together with Sebastian Seifert in Mainz, and they're really experts there, multi-angle and everything. We did together with Sebastian Jaksch, we did a small angle neutron scattering. And basically what it looks like is if we're low concentration and low temperature, we have single Gaussian chains. If we increase the concentration, if we keep a low concentration but a higher temperature, we get polymersomes. And then we go to higher concentration, we form something like a bicontinuous network, and which then becomes more like a gyroidal phase at very high concentrations at higher temperatures. I don't have the detail to go through all of this. It's published either in the paper or in the thesis, which I believe is online available if you're interested in that. Now, what is important is the structure formation is a different one than pluronic F127 or poloxamer 407. So we go through polymersomes instead of packed micelles. And then we basically fuse these polymersomes. That's what we believe is the structure formation. And you don't really have these packed micelles, core shell, but you more have like what we believe fused vesicles in a bicontinuous type phase, which could be quite interesting in terms of diffusivity of nutrients if we think about biological applications. Now, we did a lot of rheological measurements with this. I only show you very little for this one here because it's published. So you do a rheological experiment at 28%, you increase the strain and it becomes liquid. Then we stop the strain at low strain, it becomes solid very quickly. You've seen that yesterday also in a talk. So no details, so we thought this should be printable, and it is printable. If we zoom in here a little bit, you can see the individual strands here. So this is 4 layers on top of each other, but you can also see they don't maybe look not super perfect defined. There's some kind of merging and fiber fusion here. Cytocompatibility, we looked together with our colleagues in pharmacy in Würzburg. This is NIH3T3 fibroblast after 48 hours. And we see that up to 10% where it's a liquid, the polymer, or it's not a gel, we have no effect on the cell viability. And then if you go to even higher concentration, 28%, we still don't see a decrease in cell viability, which is very important that you go to these very high concentrations where you form a gel. There's no point in looking at the cytocompatibility at 1 gram per liter if the cells see, 250 times the concentration. You see here also these are stained with FDA. So if they are green, they are basically alive and well. And this is basically a C-stack in a fluorescent microscope. Okay, and here again, this is just basically same print, but different picture. You see that the print is not perfect. It's kind of merging in a way, the fibers are fusing, but in green, you see living cells, and in red, you see dead cells. And what you see is you don't see dead cells because there is no red. So the cells really like the printing here with this material. They're quite happy. And we believe this is because of this extreme shear thinning that we have. So this is a shear thinning experiment, and we looked at 2 different polymers with chain length degree of polymerization of 50 and 50 and 100 and 100 in red. And when we take this data, or Stefan Geckle in Bayreuth took this data, he basically comes up with a model how the flow looks like in the capillary. So this is a capillary of about 200 micrometer diameter, which is typically used for 3D printing. And what you see here is that basically in this whole volume here, in the majority of the volume of the capillary that you print, there is no shear stress. Because of the shear thinning character. The only shear stress is here at the side. So the only place where cells could see shear stress, which could make them unhappy, would be really this tiny volume compared to the big volume of the capillary. So this, we believe, is quite important to keep the cells happy. Then yesterday, it was mentioned that I also said that today, typically we synthesize maybe 1 gram, maybe 10 grams. Sometimes we go to 100 grams. So Lucas, for printing, I asked him, okay, can you make a kilogram? And that was one of the first tasks when he started his PhD thesis. And it's kind of challenging because the living cationic polymerization of 2-oxazolines, really, there can be no water. I mean, and no nucleophiles. You have to be very careful about impurities. But he got a kilogram quite nicely on the first try, I believe. Yes, it was on the first try. And you see here the GPC trace. You can see, it's pretty nice. There's a tiny little bit of high molar mass. But it's really, I mean, I'm certainly quite happy with that. Dispersity is 1.2, which we typically get also when we do much smaller batches. So this will give us 5 liters of bioink. So you can print now a lot, which is nice. Thanks, Lucas. He checked, of course, and the good thing really was that not only the GPC traces, but also the rheological properties were really, really well reproduced in the large batch. We saw that actually the GPC trace is one thing, but you really need to check the rheological properties in detail because small changes in a molecular structure can have a huge effect on the rheological properties, which are very sensitive. So you need to check batch-to-batch reproducibility on the rheological properties if you look at bioinks or hydrogels. So the problem is at this point that the shape fidelity is not ideal, and because you see this strand fusion. So how to improve this? It was mentioned before in one of the questions, you could use, for instance, clay. Clay is used as a rheological modifier quite often. And also in bioinks, it's used quite often. And people argue that it's actually a good additive for bioprinting because cells like it. I don't want to comment on that because I don't have personal experience with this, but for sure, it's a rheological, it does improve rheological properties, as also published here, for instance. That is not our work. But so yesterday or 3 days ago, I believe, 3 days ago, a paper came out that looked at the interaction between leponite clay and polymethyloxazoline hydrogel. So this is quite interesting, but we started our work also before, but here it also says in this paper that the interaction between polymethyloxazoline, which is our hydrophilic block of our diblock copolymer, and PEG are different. So again, you can't just say it's a hydrophilic polymer that goes through hydrogen bonding or whatever with leponite. You really have to look into the details. Okay, so this was Jen's work. Basically, she started her PhD in my group, and she thought, well, maybe I want to add some additives, and clay was basically the candidate. And she found very easily, or very early on, that yes, it doesn't affect the thermogeling. So you can see it's still liquid in cold solution, and cold temperature, it becomes still a clear hydrogel at higher temperature, room temperature. And it's really nicely injectable. So here in the pipette, you can see it's injected basically, or dropped in a way, into warm water at 37 degrees. And you can see that it forms this nice strand. So it really does very fast gel and becomes quite solid. But note, if you keep this much longer in this solution, the polymer will dissolve. It takes a while, but it will eventually dissolve because it's not covalently cross-linked or something like that. Okay, so Jen did a lot of rheology. I can only show a very, very tiny part of it. We will publish this, well, it's in print. I need to look at the proofs actually. I will probably do this night, but basically this will come out very soon. So we looked at the rheological properties, and the gel point is decreased a little bit. But overall, the gel strength is not too much affected. It's increased a little bit, but goes from 3,000 pascals to 5,000 pascals for the storage modulus. But this is not really a huge increase, I would say. I'm not really sure if it makes a big difference. But the interesting to note again, the trends that we see are not aligned with trends that have been published with pluronic clay composites. So something seems to be different. More rheological assessment. So what you see here is that the shear thinning is still there, and actually the shear thinning is improved a little bit. So the flow index of this polymer is now, with the clay, is 0.02. So it has a very nice, very strong shear thinning characteristic. Here the yield point is increased also compared without clay, which also typically helps for printing, but still you see this very, very fast thinning and recovery, and Chen was able to do this, multiple times. So the structure recovery is very fast. So this should print now really well. And Chen looked into this, and we found that really in comparison with the polymer alone at 20 weight%, which is printable, but you can see, the strands fuse and merge, and we saw that before. Now, when she adds a little bit of clay, this is 1.8 weight%, you see a drastic effect really. So the printability becomes much, much better. This is now whatever you print, or whatever you code, whatever you tell the printer to print, you really have excellent definition. She could do this up to 20 lines, so you can stack up to 20 lines. Each line has about 300 micrometers, so you can really do macroscopic stuff now. And we looked at the microstructure, if that is affected. So this is the SEM of clay. It does form a gel by itself, makes this house of cards structure, but it's not a good gel for printing. So clay itself for printing, not really good. The polyoxazolin makes this sponge-like morphology. So note, this is cryo-TEM. This is not freeze drying, but cryo. And it doesn't seem that the structure really, the pore size and so on, distribution doesn't seem to be affected a lot. We didn't analyze this in great detail, honestly, because I thought, well, it looks too similar that it's probably not worth it, but maybe we should do that, maybe if we have time. Okay, so this was the story how to improve printing of our novel hydrogel. And now we come to a new hydrogel from Lucas, who did this 1 kilogram batch. And for this, we will go to tri-block copolymers. So we switch now from diblock copolymers to tri-block copolymers. And these tri-block copolymers have side chains with benzyl or phenyl, and we compared both polyoxazoline and polyoxazine. So we did or Lucas synthesized together with a master student. We synthesized these 4 different dry block copolymers, where the hydrophobic block is either phenyloxazoline, benzyloxazoline, benzyloxazine, or phenyloxazine. And then from the phenyloxazine later, he synthesized also different length of the hydrophilic block from very, very short, only 5 units, up to 30 units. So overall, I mean, these are not huge polymers, but well, they do their job. We also changed the chain termini here, so because it's a living cation polymerization, you can introduce different functional groups quite readily. And the interesting thing now was that all of these block copolymers, of course, do self-assemble in water or aqueous media, but the self-assembly is quite different. If we compare benzyloxazine and phenyloxazine triblock copolymer, the benzyloxazine forms nice spherical micelles, very nice, as you can see here from the TEM, while the phenyloxazine forms these very, very long worms. There are a few spherical micelles, but really predominantly these are spherical worms. And this is of course now interesting because, as we saw before, that worms, these long worms, if you have a high enough concentration, you would expect that they form a gel, and that's exactly what they do. When you take the solution, you cool it down, you give it a little bit of time, it does need time, it will form a gel. And of these 4 different polymers, only this phenyloxazine triblock copolymer forms a gel. You can see that here. You start at, but this is actually the dissolution. It's a reversible gel. So we start at 5 degrees. Is a highly viscous gel, or well, it's a gel, it's not only viscous. And then if you go to 40 degrees, at around 30 degrees, you see a massive decrease in viscosity and it becomes liquid again. If we now cool it down from the liquid state, if Lucas cools it down, it doesn't immediately form a gel. It takes some time. So in this particular polymer, depending on the temperature you cool it down to, either 5 degrees or 10 degrees, it takes about 1 to 2 hours to actually become a gel. But then if you heat it up to room temperature, it stays a gel. To make it liquid again, you need to go to about 30 degrees. And that actually this warm transition, this warm and spherical transition, we also confirmed by basically, again, cryo-TEM, where we took a cold sample that was kept cold for 2 hours. We made a cryo-TEM picture of that. Then we did a sample at room temperature, and we actually incubated a sample at 40 degrees and then plunged it into the cryo plunger directly from 40 degrees. So we would really freeze the situation that is present at 40 degrees. And we saw that if we do that, we see these nice spherical micelles at 40 degrees, while if we would keep this for a longer time at room temperature, we actually would see predominantly the worms. So here the sample preparation was quite critical to confirm the worms and spherical transition. And this was work by Stefan Forster, another PhD student in my group, who really helps us out a lot with the cryo-TEM work in collaboration with Bettina Böttcher in Würzburg. Interesting in this micelles or in this material also is that they can be quite weak at 5 weight%, but you get very strong hydrogels of more than 100 kilopascals, which is a really big storage modulus for physically cross-linked gel at 40 weight%. And here you can see basically how the storage modulus evolves over the concentration. Printability analysis, Lukas did, of course, and he saw that at 10% the yield point is a little bit low, below 100 pascals, which is for printing probably the limit. And then if you go to 15%, you go about to 200 pascals, which is really much better. And so, but this analysis basically also tells you that these might be quite well printable. And that's what, but then the shear thinning is missing. So to printing, shear thinning and recovery. So this is the data here. I have to hurry a little bit, but you can see basically what I said before. This all points towards excellent printability. Cytocompatibility, we looked here at up to 10%. Again, there is no toxicity. Actually, what we do see, what I want to point out, to be honest, we see an increase in cell viability here up to about 200%. So the cells seem to grow more in this polymer. We don't know yet, and we have seen this a lot for these triblock copolymer oxazolines when we go to very high concentrations, 100 grams per liter and more. We don't know exactly what is going on here. So this is some ongoing investigation. Lukas then went to the printer, and you can see here, this is really nice prints, 28%, so 88% water. You can see that the structure is extremely well resolved. You have these strands here that are basically 300 micrometer. So this was really a happy day for, I would say, Lukas, also for me. And it's a slightly different polymer. Here you can also see really in live how you can print this material. This is very stable. You can do quite large structures that support their own weight. Very quickly, because of the Leponite story, so now we thought that we could also actually use this new bioinks or biomaterial inks to support established biological bioinks. So instead of adding Leponite to, let's say, alginate or gelatin, we thought we could actually add our polymer to it. In contrast to Leponite, however, if we basically then, we can wash out our polymer later because it does dissolve if we dilute it. So what we're doing now is we add to an, let's say, alginate, an established bioink that is very good for cells, but very poorly printable. We add our polymer to improve printability. And then after printing, we remove our polymer. And basically this worked very nicely. We did this with alginate. So you take 2% alginate, which you cannot print at all. You add 20% or 15% of our polymer, and then you cross-link the alginate with calcium chloride. And with washing, now you can remove our hydrogel, and it retains only the alginate, which is now ionically cross-linked. And you can again see here the structure. These are 300 micrometer alginate structures, which I don't know another way how to do this, because this alginate is just really poorly printable. And here you can see a little video, hopefully. Basically, this is now alginate printed with the help of our Lukas's hydrogel, and you can really nicely handle it. This is quite stable, and it doesn't swell, it doesn't fall apart. This alginate is now stable for weeks, which is really interesting for this particular kind of application. If I may, a few slides, Sergey?
Yes, you may, because Helmut Schlatt just sent a message that there is no rush. So okay. You have a couple of minutes more.
Okay, thanks, Helmut. So now I just want to, it's only 3 slides for this, to do actually combined drug delivery. So going back to what Michael Cook was talking about with hydrogels. So for drug delivery, we typically also, we have worked for a couple of years with triblock copolymers, but here we used propyl side chain or butyl side chain, so much shorter side chains. And these polymers we utilize for drug delivery. And these were basically the ones that Sergey mentioned that have this strange high drug loading capacity. So this was published some time ago. I don't want to go into detail, but we basically take different drugs, paclitaxel, curcumin. Maria was talking about curcumin before, and the problems associated with it. We do not conjugation. We just dissolve it in ethanol, the drug and the polymer. We dry the ethanol off, and then we just add water. It's super simple. We get micelles directly by this approach. And we can solubilize drugs, and we did paclitaxel and curcumin. And here we basically get up to more than 50% weight of drug loading. So we can solubilize more curcumin than we actually use polymer for doing so, which is really unusual if you think about polymer micelles. I don't think there are many other reports out there. So we did a lot of work on this. We know now, I think we know now why this happens, but I don't have time to talk about this. Paclitaxel we also did, and many other drugs. Now, if you want to know more about this, Sasha Kabanov, I hope and I believe will talk about this in a few hours. His talk will be super high capacity polymeric micelles for cancer therapeutics, which I hope he will actually talk also about these polymers, which I believe he will be, because I don't know any other super high capacity polymer micelles. Now, we now thought, Michael, in the end of his thesis, he thought, okay, why not combine our hydrogels and our drug-loaded polymers? So what you see here is the hydrogel in a solid state, and on top of it, he just pushed he added the freeze-dried polymer drug powder. So you take the micellar solution, you freeze dry it, and then you just put it there. You put it in the shaker at the cold temperature in the freezer at 5 degrees or so, so the hydrogel becomes liquid. And then you can see that after, it takes a while because it's a highly viscous system, but after basically 2 days, it's completely dissolved. And you can see that the curcumin nicely dissolves in a clear solution in the hydrogel. And if you take this out of the fridge, it becomes solid again. The rheological, we did a lot of rheology on that too, and it's important to do that because the drug can affect the rheology because it's a hydrophobic drug. It's a polymer that gels through hydrophobic interactions. So a hydrophobic polymer, a drug will affect the rheological properties. So this is also in this paper. Now, what we did here for drug deliveries, we basically took this solution, and you can see here with a very, very thin syringe. I mean, this is like a micro syringe, like Hamilton syringe, right? You can take it up, and then we inject it into a collagen hydrogel. So the collagen, basically, we thought this is like a very simple mimic of our skin. So for subcutaneous injection and depot, this is the collagen. Then he injected like 5 microliters here of the collagen hydrogel micelle formulation. And after 2 days, it just diffuses basically. And we looked at how long it takes for all the curcumin to be released in a transwell chamber. And we saw that if we just put the curcumin in the polymer micelles as a control, actually we don't see full release. For some reason, the micelles get stuck in the collagen, and you see these orange spots in the yellow gel. These are, for whatever reason we don't know yet, the micelles that are stuck in the collagen hydrogel. If, however, we have the micelles in our hydrogel and we inject that, then we do see 100% release over about 50 to 60 days. So it's a very, very long, prolonged drug release. If you really need that long drug release, that's another question, but I think it's quite interesting to have that, and it's a 100% drug release. If you don't add the polymer micelles, you can also dissolve the drug only in the hydrogel polymer. Then you also see a complete release, but it's a bit slower. So this is interesting. There are many things we don't really understand yet in this context, but it certainly is, I believe it's interesting. And with that, I'm almost at the end. Basically, again, I want to thank all the people that did that. All this work was not done in Helsinki. This is my first talk as not being a professor in Germany anymore, but being a full professor and 100% time in Helsinki. Unfortunately, I don't have too much work yet done, or we couldn't, Chang-Fang Wang, my postdoc, and we didn't do too much yet in Helsinki. So this is work from Würzburg, of course. I want to thank all my collaborators and also Vladimir from Helsinki. We did some work on this together. For the nanoformulations, this is a team, basically Michael and Heather. Michael is now off to a job. Heather is about to defend his thesis. I want to also thank financial support through DFG there. And just 2 more slides, just really to highlight the work of Daniel. Now, how to make microfiber hydrogel scaffolds. And I will not go into any detail. It's published in Materials Horizons, but I want to show you that this can actually be done. So these microfibers, they're only about 50 micrometer thick, but they're basically hydrogels. And they have really, really nice properties. Here, a small video. You can suck them up. This is 80% water, 90% water, eject them, and they're completely stable. So this is, I was really, when I saw this, yeah, I was quite stunned by this work from Daniel. And then we seeded in collaboration with the Willmann lab, we seeded cells on top of this. And this is just the last video. And with that, I'm done. I thank you for listening.